This episode is in memory of Merja, who enjoyed the occasional whisky herself. The whisky-loving tones on the microphone are brought to you by
Inka Larissa and my whisky partner in crime, Jennifer Rose.
Yes, indeed. Whether you are a whisky newbie or have been around the whisky block for some time, buckle up for some whisky mischief as we delve deeper into Scotch and explore whiskies from around the world.
You can keep up to date with our global whisky news in the Stick Your Nose in It section. And we hope you'll join us in raising a glass as we taste our drams and share our honest opinions.
And of course, we will be interviewing some whisky industry movers and shakers, as well as keeping those brains sharp in Whisky Sisters Whisky Facts.
As always, we will be sharing our own whisky journey and invite you to come along for the ride. Whisky lovers, get your drams ready.
Welcome to Season 2 of Whisky Sisters, the podcast.
So, we are back. The Whisky Sisters back in the house. How does it feel, Jennifer?
It feels about time. Do you know what, Inka? I'm going to just admit it. I've been missing you. I've been missing our recording sessions. It's about time we were back. Have you had a good summer?
Yes, it's been epic. Epic. Loads of music, it's been too hot as well, to be honest. But I don't know, there's something calm about starting recording for the podcast again, isn't it?
Definitely. I've had some nice whiskey adventures during the summer and some good fun, but yeah, it's definitely time to be back to business.
Yes, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
Yeah, I hope you've been crying into your pillows, missing us so much, and haven't found other podcasts to favour. Let's face it.
I know.
And maybe we should welcome any new listeners. Hello and welcome. We hope you will stay.
Yes, welcome, and we're glad you're joining our whiskey journey. So, in this season of Whisky Sisters, the podcast, we will be visiting Scotland's oldest working distillery, exploring the world of cigar malts, talking about terroir. We will review whiskey from Italy, Ireland, England, and other countries, and there will be some fabulous guests also.
And if that's not enough, today we are starting with an American whiskey. Indeed, today's episode is the perfect way to bring together two of Inka and I's biggest passions, whiskey and music. Just when you thought the whiskey world was mind-blowing enough, buckle up, listeners, as we are going to be catching up with Rob Dietrich, master distiller of Metallica's Blackened American whiskey.
We'll be finding out how he ended up with possibly the coolest job in the universe and all things Blackened. And make sure you listen all the way through to our Dram on Fire section to find out how you can get yourself a sample of Blackened. But first, let's stick our noses into latest whiskey news.
Stick your nose in it.
Jim Beam owner Beam Suntory has revealed further details of its distillery expansion in Kentucky, which will increase the production by 50%. They are investing a whopping $400 million.
Ooh, they are splashing the cash.
For sure. The expansion is expected to be completed by 2024 and create more than 50 full-time jobs. Great news. And Beam Suntory said that the project would also reduce the distillery's greenhouse gas emissions by 50%. Excellent.
Very cool. Yeah, that's excellent. And a very quick news flash about Scotch Malt Whisky Society. The owner of the Scotch Malt Whisky Society saw revenue climb by a quarter in the first 6 months of 2022, led by significant growth in the UK, Europe, and China. The company noted robust growth in its European membership, which went up by 33% since the launch of the new EU route to market at the end of 2021. Do you think it's got something to do with our episode on the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, Inka?
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Yeah, for those who aren't familiar with the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, SMWS, it is a membership organisation which bottles and sells single cask, single malt whisky with totally funky names and other spirits from more than 20 countries. More info about the society, listen back onto episode 14.
Whisky Sisters!
Blackened American Whiskey launched in 2018 as a collaboration between Metallica and master distiller Dave Pickerel. Dave was behind brands such as Whistle Pig and Hill Rock Estate, but Dave sadly passed away shortly after the launch in late 2018. Such a sad time for everybody within the industry. It was then that master distiller Rob Dietrich joined the team as guardian of Dave's legacy blend.
It is a blend of straight whiskies, and once blended, it is finished in black brandy casks. Straight whiskey basically means that the spirit has been matured minimum of 2 years. Straight whiskey can be made of mixture of straight whiskies from the same state, and if spirits from other states are used, the whiskey must be labeled as blended. So it could be blended straight whiskey, I think.
Oh, cool. And whiskey, EY, let's not forget when we're in America.
Whiskey!
There's a lot to discuss, so let's go straight to the interview with Whiskey Rob.
Rob Dietrich.
So welcome, Rob, and we are so glad you could join us today.
Very pleased to join you. That's very exciting.
So before we hear more about Blackened American whiskey, could you just share a little bit more about your whiskey journey and how did you end up working in whiskey?
You know, it's interesting. I've had a very storied career, I think, in a lot of different ways. I have a background from the military to the music industry. Music was always my passion first, and that's why once I discovered that you could actually work in the music business, that was for me, it was the most exciting thing on the planet. Until I discovered that you can make whiskey, and then that changed everything. My original job in the whiskey industry, in the spirits industry, was because of motorcycles. I had a motorcycle that my friend and I were building. It was an old Czechoslovakian bike called a Jawa. We were working with alternative fuel, starting it on diesel, and then we could transfer it over to vegetable oil. And I was in the alternative fuel, and I met the original owner and distiller for Stranahan's Colorado whiskey. It's a single malt here in Colorado, and he had a motorcycle that he was working on to run off of the heads, which is the waste product from the distillation process. And for one, I was like, oh, that's an awesome idea. And two, I was like, you have a distillery? I want to see this place. And so we started working on motorcycles at the distillery. And as soon as I walked in and I saw that 800-gallon pot still, I need to know how to do this. I have to know how to do this. So I started working out on the bottling line there, and then working the night shift from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. I did that for like 4 years straight because I wanted to learn, and I convinced him to add another shift because they only had 2 shifts. And I was like, well, you could add 2 to 3 more barrels of whiskey a week if you add 1 more shift.
I love that. You hustled and got a shift.
Totally hustled it. I started to learn my palate and playing around with blending. And what I think is great is that anyone can really start, if you're focusing on it, you can learn how to do that. You take any whiskey and start to blend them together and see what you come up with.
And I love that you've worked like from the grassroots up, really kind of earned your stripes through the industry. Rob, we understand you get the dream job at Blackened after going through various interviews, including an interview with Metallica themselves at Metallica HQ.
Yes.
Extreme excitement. They seem like so passionate and invested in the integrity of Blackened as a quality product. And we imagine that it was like so important for them to get the right fit to be Dave's successor. So we would love for you to tell us about that process for you and being selected as the man.
And it was such an awesome journey. I was so excited to get that call. I'd known Dave. I know him very well. We're a small community, a distilling community. We all know each other. We've all worked together or side by side, or we've been on a whiskey panel together at some point. I was actually at the event in San Francisco where Dave passed away. And it was, it was a very sad moment for our entire community. It was hard to see one of our own to go. And that was in November of 2018. And then December of that same year, I was at Whiskey Fest, New York. And I went over to the Blackened booth to offer my condolences to everyone there. And that was when the director of sales said, he said, I love everything you're doing at Stranahan's. He said, you have this rock and roll background. He goes, I think you would be a perfect fit. Would you be interested in interviewing? And I was like, of course, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. And, it was my understanding at the time that they were looking at about 10 different distillers. I got the call in February to go do the interview, and I was ecstatic. It was just such a cool experience. But I did several interviews, and every time I did an interview, they were saying, okay, well, we're narrowing it down from 10 to 6. Now there's 6, so I kept thinking, I felt like I was like on American Idol or something.
Yeah, Whiskey Idol.
And then the final interview was at Metallica HQ in California. I was excited about it. And in my mind, at that point, I think I'd heard there were 3 distillers that they were looking at.
Yeah.
And I made up my mind that, it doesn't matter if I get this job. Just having this experience in itself is going to be a fun experience, and just go with it and be okay with the outcome. It is what it is, and just be yourself. And so I rented a car in Portland, Oregon, and I drove down the coast all the way down the West Coast on a road trip. Listen to Metallica the entire way, of course. And I originally wanted to rent a Harley, but I just gotten a cold, and I was on a lot of cold medicine, so I didn't want to try riding 2 wheels. I interviewed with the band, each individual band member, starting with Rob Trujillo. He is such a sweetheart of a human being, and he's such a badass too. Like you see when you see him play, he's like he's just got that surf vibe. Really great talking with him. And then and that was James Hetfield. We were talking, immediately found we had a mutual love of vintage motorcycles and cars, vintage cars. And he asked me about my military career. He said, "I understand you're a combat veteran." Yeah, I am. And he said, "Well, I have something for you." And he stood up and he reached into his pocket and he pulled out this coin. And the way you give a challenge coin is through a handshake. And a challenge coin is in the military is if you've achieved something or you've been a part of a special unit or something, you get a challenge coin, and you receive it through a handshake. So he reached out his hand and gave me the handshake, and I looked down and there was this coin. It's a Metallica coin. That says, "I am family." He gave me this hug, and I was like, "Oh,
oh my God, that's amazing.
It was such a cool experience. That's the best job interview I've ever had in my life.
Oh my God, goosebumps.
Yes, I still get goosebumps from it. And they're just so passionate about what they do. And it's really important for them to have someone as part of their family who's just as passionate about making the whiskey as they are about making music.
Definitely. And that seems so heartfelt, so personal. And that's the impression you get, as somebody kind of looking in. And that's cool to hear that was your experience. That sounds amazing.
How involved are they actually in the making of the whiskey itself?
I think, initially when they came up with the idea to release a whiskey, the idea really came from their fans. They reached out to their fan base and said, "Hey, if we were going to do a spirit, we were going to release a spirit, what would you want to drink?" And hands down, it was whiskey. They recognize that this is a way to connect to their fans. So
I love that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it's amazing, and I do love how passionate they are about their fans, the fan base, and how it's it's vice versa, that they're very loyal to their fans, and the fans are very loyal to them. They didn't want to just go to a large whiskey company and ask them to make a Metallica line and just slap a Metallica label on it. It was really important that they owned the whiskey outright, and that it is a whiskey that can stand on its own and a force to be reckoned with in the whiskey world. Really made the great decision to work with Dave Pickerel originally, because he is such a fantastic whiskey maker, and he was well known in the craft distilling community here in the U.S. And I think that was the most important thing that they could do, was start out making something that was quality. So as far as what kind of whiskey, to your question, Inka, is that they really left that up to Dave. Dave knew all these different people in the whiskey community, and an understanding that you could take some of the best whiskeys on the planet and blend them together to create something phenomenal.
Could you tell us then what actually goes into Blackened?
Yes, so we are a blend of bourbon and rye. It's a little bourbon forward. So bourbon being, by definition, 51% corn, and then the rest could be more corn or rye or barley. And then the rye, we have a couple of different rye whiskeys in there. So one is a 95% rye, so you get a really, I love a really spicy, earthy rye. I feel like I love the intensity of it. Yeah.
Literally, just before the call, I was sipping some Blackened with Jen, and I was saying I just love the spiciness and the earthiness, that kind of herbal that comes through the sweetness.
And the beauty about that is now you're taking these two beautiful whiskeys, you're blending them together, and then doing a cask finish, which is one of the things that I had gotten a reputation for at Stranahan's, was doing these specialty releases of cask finish whiskeys, doing a cask finish in brandy casks and allowing that kind of that darker fruit note to really kind of tie the two whiskeys together, that spiciness and earthiness of the rye, the sweetness of the bourbon, and then the kind of that dark fruit note in the middle, which really just it creates those layers. When I start out to make a blend, I always kind of look at it in three points. You have the beginning, middle, and end, and then layers in between, and then you want that final finish. It's like a 3-act play. Just drawing your palate in.
It's a real journey, isn't it?
It is.
We all have some in our glass just now. It might be helpful to say to our listeners. And I was just saying how easily it's going down.
There's an artistry in finding balance in blending like that.
So you mentioned the black brandy casks. Are they from Spain? I believe
they originally were, yes.
Okay.
We're no longer using Spanish brandy casks just because, to be honest, like COVID really kind of slowed down those avenues of being able to readily purchase barrels and get them in a timely manner. So we were able to find a brandy that I felt was phenomenal, that we were able to procure their casks and use them.
Okay.
And so I feel like that was a tactical move and a move out of necessity and not in any way compromising the original flavor profile.
Yeah, because on the bottle it says black brandy casks. What I was trying to find information about the black brandy, I didn't quite find. So would you be able to explain a bit more what that means?
That is a great question. I get asked that a lot because it is that's a term that Dave Pickerel originally coined about the brandy casks, particularly Spanish brandy, the depth of color and darkness of it. He called it black brandy, although there is no real official term for it. And I think I think it was a cool term that he came up with.
Okay. that makes sense.
it, why you couldn't find anything on it.
But it goes with the branding, so.
Exactly. And Rob, there's no age statement on the bottles. Are you able to give us any information on aging times? Can you let us into some Whiskey Rob blending secrets?
So the age, American legal standards, if it is older than 4 years, you don't have to put the age statement on the bottle. If it's younger than 4 years, you have to put the age statement on there. And especially with a blend, I have different ages. So it's going to be an average of those ages and not necessarily one specific age because we are an American blended whiskey. So that is an average of, right now it's about an average of 7 year in white American oak. First fill white American oak with a number 3 char, especially with your explorations in Scotch. Understanding that second use barrels, you're going to have a lot more delicate colors and delicate flavors in a Scotch, a lot lighter in color. And, if it's a 12-year Scotch, that's 12 years in a used barrel. Whereas in a brand new barrel, it takes less time to extract the flavor out of the wood. So age is really kind of relative depending on the process that you're using.
Older doesn't necessarily mean better either.
Age does not always reflect maturity.
No, and it really depends on the locations and the temperatures, and there's so many things that contribute to whiskey. So
you're exactly right. It's so many factors. For example, Colorado, where I'm at, we're at 5,280 feet above sea level, and we're considered a high desert. So high altitude, dry climate. The evaporation in a barrel will happen. So water molecules are smaller than alcohol molecules, so they'll actually evaporate out of the barrel before alcohol. So you'll lose volume, but the proof will go up in the barrel at least in this environment. Then you have Kentucky, which is a very humid environment and also very hot, which is a great temperature for aging. For example, like rum, like in Trinidad or Jamaica, that environment's kind of perfect. It's very tropical. There's warmth. It's a great environment for a barrel.
Okay, what is black noise?
Great question. The idea originally came from Dave when he was a cadet at West Point, which is the officers' school in the Army. And he met the owner the caretaker for the cathedral there. They had a huge cathedral with this huge pipe organ. And the guy showed him this note where when he played it, the whole building would vibrate. Wow. And it stuck with him that maybe there's a way to use sound inside the barrel and see if that actually creates a change. And that was and obviously with the loudest, heaviest metal band on the planet, using their wall of sound seemed like a great idea to try and play around with. So the concept, when they were first looking into it, I've done the same research and development. I actually just finished another research project with the sound company that we use that creates that wall of sound for Metallica. They're out of California. Their name is Meyer Sound. Wow. And they created a proprietary device that we use to play low frequency music, of course, Metallica music, to the barrels. And so doing that, when you have low frequency, you think about it like a bass, like the sound of a bass. If you at a concert and you're walking in front of a speaker and you feel that vibration in your chest, that movement, that's what we set out to replicate inside the barrel. So in normal aging, during the heat of the day, the pores of the wood will open up. The whiskey will move into the wood and pick up all those flavors. And then when it's cold at night, it expresses it back out into the belly. When you char the inside of a barrel, you get all those natural sugars. The vanillins create a caramelized band of sugar that the whiskey's moving in and out of and picking up naturally. Now, when you're applying the Black Noise Sonic Enhancement process, you're now creating this vibration. You're making that motion. You're making that movement. Every time it's got that motion and movement, and that's going in and out of the wood, it's going to change and pick up different elements. We applied some science to this initially because we really wanted to see what was happening inside the barrel. So we had 3 barrels that were all the same whiskey, same age, and we took 2 of the barrels and had them in the sonic enhancements. And then the 3rd barrel we had in a separate room with no sonic enhancement to it. And we were taking samples from it incrementally at the same time all the way through the process. And so we were able to pinpoint exactly what changes were going on inside the barrel. For example, there are 9 different flavor profile markers that you're looking for. The oak aroma panel. So 9 different flavor profiles that you discover, that you find in the wood. Every single one of those aspects were elevated and are proof that the Black Noise process works, which is why we trademarked the name Black Noise and have a patent pending on our process and on the equipment that we use.
Okay. So I guess that's why the finishing period is fairly short, because 2 to 10 weeks. Oh,
Correct.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just like comparing to Scotch a little bit here, but yeah, so I can see you would get much more flavors by using that noise.
Correct. And depending on how fresh my brandy barrels are, that's really going to reflect on how long it's going to be in those barrels. You know, if they're fresh, then it might only need 2 weeks. But I'm always, tasting it through its process to ensure that we're not over finishing or under finishing.
It's such a cool concept completely, and it makes so much sense. The agitation of the liquid, has a completely different flavor profile, and as well, just imagining the process happening. It's just like, it's scientific, but it's also kind of magical and cool.
It is. It's amazing what you can do with a finishing barrel. Most recent release, the Rye the Lightning, where I took all rye whiskey in Madeira casks, and then removed it from the Madeira casks, and then did a cask finish in rum casks.
Well, I was just going to ask about other casks you've been using, and you just mentioned the Madeira and rum, and just, sounds amazing. We were actually trying to get our hands on a bottle of Rye the Lightning, but we couldn't do it just yet.
Rob, with you and Metallica at the wheel, we imagine, like, with that creative energy and that dedication to quality in so many different ways, we imagine there is a lot more to come, although Blackened is already award-winning, and congratulations for that. What is next for Blackened?
This is what I think is fun about, one, working with artists. They understand the need and space for creativity.
Exactly.
And that really is exciting. I have some projects I've been working on that it's really kind of like, okay, it doesn't matter how bizarre or how extreme, I'm just going to do it, and either it gets picked up or it doesn't. So that's the fun part, is just playing. I'm like a kid in a toy chest. I'm able to like just start playing around with different ideas and different concepts. We have the Masters of Whiskey series, where I've been doing a collaboration with other master distillers. And we did that. We released one last year. I did with Willet Whiskey. Drew Colesveen is the master distiller for Willet. And we worked together, had a blast creating a limited release. I'm working with another master distiller this year for a limited release that's going to come out in the fall. I have another really exciting project that I've been working on for 2 years, and I can't say anything about it yet. But,
Rob,
but
come
coming out
on.
later this year. Because there's so many ways traditionally to make whiskey, but now we have all this modern technology that we can play around with, and why not? Why not?
Let's shake it up a bit.
Yes, exactly.
So I read that before you got involved with Blackened, you had a mezcal brand in the works, and I love mezcal. So I was just wondering if this is something that you might do at some point.
That could be a possibility. I am very, very passionate about mezcal. I love mezcal. I love that smokiness. I feel like mezcal is the Scotch of the tequila world.
Yeah,
it's got
definitely.
smoky kind of almost like peaty flavors to it. And
I know. Maybe you could finish some Blackened in a mezcal cask.
Right. Yeah. We talked about that. There's certainly ideas around that.
Talking of concepts, Rob, we hear that you like a cigar and have been known to enjoy a catch up over a cigar with James Hetfield. How do you find that Blackened pairs with cigars? And would you ever consider making a kind of cigar blend?
Definitely. I for one, to answer your first question, the cigars go great with Blackened. I love darker tobacco. I don't really like the spicier cigars. I definitely like the darker style, and that works perfectly with all those cacophony of flavor from Blackened. There's all those little beautiful, delicate notes in there, and having a good cigar with it pairs very well. And as far as making like a cigar blend, I think it's always in the back of my head anyway. Like when I'm making a whiskey, that is this going to be something I'm going to enjoy with the cigar, or I do have some ideas.
So what's the best way to drink Blackened, and like how do you drink it?
I prefer a glass. It's much harder if it's just cupped in your hand. So that's the
straight from the bottle.
I prefer if I'm tasting a whiskey, and that goes for really any whiskey, but specifically Blackened. I prefer drinking it neat. Glencairn is always just such a great glass for nosing. Yeah. I always start out with nosing a whiskey if I'm trying it for the first time, or even for blending. If I'm blending several whiskeys, I will nose all the whiskeys first. Before I won't taste them, and I'll nose them several times, and then I'll get an idea of what's probably going to work, and then I'll taste those whiskeys and start working on my blend and how that works. I joke a lot. People ask me if what's your favorite cocktail, and my favorite cocktail is blackened whiskey and ice. That's my cocktail if I'm going to get fancy. But I do enjoy, an old fashioned or those type of things.
So we mentioned earlier as well that Blackened is unfortunately not available in Europe just yet. Where is it available, and do you have plans to expand into our neck of the woods as well?
We definitely do. That is, we get requests all the time to go to the international markets. We are currently expanding in Canada and Australia.
So we'd like to ask you your dream dram, which is your celebrity, dead or alive, that you would share a whiskey with, and 3 sipping songs to have a soundtrack to that amazing sharing of a whiskey.
That is a great question, a great layered question. If they're living, I still have time to go have a dram with them. So I feel like I have to choose someone that's dead, because
for sure
I still have an opportunity. I still have a chance.
Yeah, they might be backstage at Metallica.
Right, exactly. So I might still have an opportunity to. So I'm going to go with, it'd have to be Lemmy Kilmister. It would have to be Lemmy pulling up in a rat rod with Anthony Bourdain in the back. You'd have to be like, he's got this rat rod. It'd have to be like Anthony Bourdain in the back of the rat rod and Hunter S. Thompson. And I think I know I'm cheating, because I know you only asked me one person.
You're the master distiller at Blackened. You can say whatever you want, Rob.
Well, I think so. It's Lemmy driving a rat rod with Anthony Bourdain and Hunter S. Thompson.
Amazing. But talk to us about the songs, because that is maybe a tough question.
That is a tough question, and I'm definitely a mood person. I think, like most people are, like, what's your mood at what time of day? Mm-hmm. I would say one of my favorite songs, this is a song that was kind of our anthem when I was in the Army overseas, was Rooster from Alice in Chains. I absolutely love that song.
Amazing.
For years, my ringtone on my phone was Rock the Casbah by The Clash. And I think that's a song that you just can't help but, like, you immediately just start, Rock the Casbah. You just want
the shoulders are going, right?
No, third song, I feel like anything from Motorhead, that's not the name of the song, just like any song from Motorhead.
And if I'm right, I believe that without Motorhead, there would be no Metallica, because it was such a strong influence.
Totally agree.
Like, not to judge our previous guest, but that's got to be the coolest answer, Inka, right?
I know.
Now, Rob, I'm glad you're sitting down, okay? Because I need you to brace yourself. You're part of the Metallica family. You're a whiskey rock star in your own right. But let's just listen to this. You're now part of the Whisky Sister family.
Yay! Excellent.
In honor of that, we're going to be sending you a little bit of cheeky merchandise. When I say merchandise, it's on the lower end of the spectrum. Don't get too excited, right? But we are honestly so honored to have you on our podcast.
Excellent. Well, cheers. Ladies, it's such an honor to be able to spend some time with you, talking all things whiskey and Blackened whiskey. I look forward to the day when we can actually share one in person and really dive deep on everything whiskey.
Dram on Fire.
Dram on Fire is back.
Yes, it's time for us to stick our noses not only into the news, but in these delicious whiskey glasses. Well, we've got slightly different batch numbers, haven't we, Inka? I'm sipping from batch number 125.
Yeah, so my batch number is 127, which actually, each batch they have the playlist. So this playlist of my bottle was selected by no other than James Hetfield himself.
Oh, so lucky!
Yeah, it's the first song of the playlist, and I was listening to it when I was sipping this.
I'm not going to lie,
meant to be.
Inka. I'm a little bit jealous of your playlist because my playlist for 125 is good, but it's not as good as yours. Not going to lie.
What? I love your playlist. 125. Well, it's like there's Fuel, Seek and Destroy,
Which
and
is
Whiskey
one-
in the Jar.
Which is they're pretty epic tunes. Quick gin whiskey fact when it comes to James Hetfield. It's not a whiskey fact at all, and it's a digression. Did I tell you about the dream I had about James Hetfield? Oh, Inka, picture the scene, right? So it was in the UK we call it a caravan. I think in the States you call it like a trailer from a trailer park, right? So in the dream, I'm in this caravan with James Hetfield. There's a lot of people there, and I'm like, oh, that's James Hetfield from Metallica. And then I'm like, play it cool, play it cool. I swear to goodness, right? I went into my handbag, I took out a wooden pen and said, hey, James, do you like my pen?
So cool.
Yeah. And he said, no.
Oh, no.
And see, when I woke up, Inka, I was like, Jen, you had one dream chance to meet James Hetfield and you blew it. Do you like my pen?
Our listeners are here for the whiskey, not
Indeed.
necessarily for the metal. Yes. The color is, I would say, nice dark golden, quite.
I would say
It's like dark
deep
honey.
Yeah, I would say it's a dark ambery honey golden.
Yeah, yeah.
So on the nose, I'll be honest, Inka, I was kind of worried that I would go nose blind just because I love Metallica so much. And I thought, no, properly nose it. So I have been doing.
Yeah, and I think I did struggle at first a little bit. I couldn't. It was very mellow and just quite sweet, but I left it in the glass again just to breathe a little bit, and now I can definitely get much more.
Definitely. So I think there's really lovely sweetness on the nose, not an overpowering sickly sweetness, maybe some tones of honey, like a wee candy called Maltesers, and it's like a light malted biscuit with milk chocolate on the outside. And I was getting that kind of nice malty, mildly honeycombed sweetness.
Yeah, yeah. And I was thinking vanilla wafers.
Oh, yeah.
You could definitely get the dried fruits from the brandy. Maybe even there's some sort of freshness cutting through the sweetness, which made me think of red currants or some sort of red fruit that's not super sweet.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that, the red berries. And although I was struggling to pinpoint, I was feeling some sort of citrusy. I wanted to say orange, but it didn't feel quite orange.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some sort of citrusy thing going on there.
Yeah, really nice on the nose. I've not really tried many sort of American whiskies, and I was like, I could be getting used to this. Do you enjoy it on the nose?
Yeah, I do. On the palate, I think the initial feeling is quite soft, quite rounded. There's no burn.
It goes down very smoothly, doesn't it? And there's that nice spice kick, I think,
So this is the rye, it's bourbon and rye mix.
Yeah.
You definitely have that kick from the rye, but not intrusive.
Not
But it's just
overpoweringly so, is it?
No, white pepper came to mind.
I would agree with the white pepper and maybe some candied peel, but again, a really lovely, quite mellow sweetness for me, not an overpowering.
Definitely that sweetness of caramel, or that maybe even that Malteser that you mentioned earlier, that kind of milk chocolatey caramel, something soft and sweet, but again, not super duper. And I don't know, now that you mentioned the citrus, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'm getting a little bit citrus on the finish together with some woodiness.
I was just going to say, Inka, what about the woodiness? Because as I let this sit and settle on the finish, I'm getting a really lovely woodiness come through. But see my excited self, I'm thinking, oh, Lars Ulrich's drumsticks, woody drumsticks. Then I'm like, right, chill out, no, because it's quite a, that oaky, deep woodiness that gives. We were talking with Rob like a bit earlier about aging and age statements, not always, it's not all about age, it's about quality. But that kind of like aged lovely woodiness. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I'm getting that.
Virgin oak. So obviously there's quite a lot of influence. And then, I don't know, the lemony. Like I'm getting lemon or something on the finish now as well.
There's definitely something citrusy. I'm finding it shockingly easy to drink, that I would need to be careful with my house measures of Blackened.
I know. This is funny because I've been so focused on single malt, so I've not been drinking too many American whiskeys and always kind of thinking that they are too sweet for me. I'm quite surprised that
is this changing your mind on that, would you say, Inka?
Yeah, definitely. And I can see like maybe some of our listeners might think, you guys are biased because you love Metallica and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's a really nice whiskey.
I agree, Inka. I think it totally stands alone. Like, even though I was super curious and excited to try it, I'm quite surprised at how much I enjoy the Dram in its own right. I think it's really, really nice.
Yeah. And to be fair, like we are normally honest on like, we do say if something is not up to our standards. So
we're not shy with our tasting notes.
No.
Inka, see if you were a spirit. Like, how exciting would it be to have been blasted with the Metallica vibrations?
Maybe we could make a pen for you from the old casts that have been vibrated with Metallica music.
Show it to James. Do you like this one, James? Okay, one more thing, Inka. Like, just quickly talking to Metallica. All the episodes won't be like this, but when we went to see them?
Yeah.
How amazing was it?
So amazing.
So amazing. And if there are any reports from Florence of two women running hand in hand shouting, "We want Lars," that wasn't us.
Yeah, definitely not.
So because Blackened is not available in Europe yet, we thought we would send a few of our listeners a sample so you know exactly what we are talking about. Simply send us a DM to let us know you have listened to the episode. Inka will choose 2 people within the EU and I will select 2 within the UK, and we will pop those cheeky samples in the post to you.
We want to share our whiskey journey with you, so at least this way some of you get the sample Blackened as well, and hopefully it will be available for the wider audience soon enough.
Whisky Sisters Whisky Fact.
Inka, I hear you've discovered the secrets of bourbon for today's episode.
Many wants to actually think that bourbon whiskey was named after Bourbon County. And that kind of makes sense because a lot of bourbon is made in the area.
Yeah.
However, people were referring to bourbon whiskey well before Bourbon County or the old Bourbon region were incorporated.
Oh, really?
Yes, and there's this guy, this bourbon historian, Mike Beach, has done a great deal of research on the subject. I would like to believe his version, considering that Michael was inducted into the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame in 2006. He's also written and contributed to 5 books about the subject, and he's a bourbon historian. So, I think he knows his stuff.
Absolutely,
basically.
yeah.
He has discovered bourbon labels that originated in the 1850s. And the claim that bourbon was named after Bourbon County doesn't actually appear in print until 1870s.
Oh.
His theory is that the name bourbon originated in New Orleans and was popularized by Bourbon Street. You must have heard Bourbon Street.
No way, yeah, absolutely.
So the story began when 2 men, the Tarascon brothers, relocated from Cognac, France, to Louisville. The brothers had a plan to win over the French-leaning residents of New Orleans. At the time, cognac was popular in the city, but also expensive. And by aging a Kentucky whiskey in charred oak barrels, the brothers believed that the whiskey would taste more like the cognac that the French Louisiana residents preferred, and asked it by name, like, "Oh, can I have the Bourbon Street whiskey?" and so on. And Bourbon Street is actually older than bourbon whiskey itself.
Wow.
It gets even, if you dig even deeper, there's just so much more to it. So Elijah Craig is credited with inventing bourbon in about 1789.
Whoa.
And that was 68 years after Royal Engineer Adrian de Berger, I don't know, it's a French name, so I'm not very good with that, named Rue Bourbon after French dynasty, the House of Bourbon. Like, even that is really cool. House of Bourbon dynasty from France. Like, I'm thinking House of Gucci movie vibes. Like
Yeah.
someone should make a movie about this.
I want to be from House of Something.
The French had claimed Louisiana in the 1690s and kept it until the US gained control of it in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase and translated the street names into English, making Rue Bourbon Bourbon Street.
Do you know what? That's an amazing story, actually, and all those layers of the history.
Yeah, so basically, to summarize, so Bourbon Street was named after the French dynasty, and then those two, like French brothers, started to create whiskey in that area, and that's where it came from.
What a legacy. What a whiskey fact that is.
I'm Rob Dietrich, the master distiller and blender for Blackened American whiskey, and you've been listening to the Whisky Sisters podcast.
Well, that's a wrap for the first episode of the season. But in next week's episode, we will be giving you all the details about our visit to Scotland's oldest working distillery, Glenturret, and talking about the French. The distillery is now owned by a French company and they have created one luxurious experience. And we will also be reviewing a few samples from Glenturret.
So get yourself a good measure of Glenturret Highland Single Malt and join us next Wednesday.
Meanwhile, listeners, old and new, you can keep up to date with all things Whisky Sisters on our Instagram at whiskysisters.podcast, Twitter at Whisky Sisters, and Facebook at Whisky Sisters Podcast. And you might want to be checking out those social media channels if you've not already, because we've got a rather swanky promo video that you don't want to miss.
Don't forget to send us those DMs that you've listened to this episode and we know that you want to try some Blackened, so we will both choose 2 people.
We sure will. And don't be shy, listeners, with those Apple reviews. If they're 5-star, get a type in. If they're lower, don't waste your time. Just have another dram.
Yeah, exactly. Or listen to another episode and see if you like that one. May your glass be full.
And your dram on fire.
Bye, Jennifer.
Bye, Inka.